Okay, so this was years ago. I'm talking when I was around 15 years old. I'm 24 now, so forgive me if the details are a bit vague. It's one of those memories where certain parts are very vivid and the rest are a bit blurry. When I was a kid, around 7 or 8, I loved going to Barnes& Noble. Like it was my version of the park. I'd beg my dad to take me. Typically, our routine was we'd split up when we entered the store. I would go pick out my manga volumes or chapter books, and my dad would browse the sports magazines. When I was done choosing, I'd go get my dad, and we'd head to the in-store cafe to buy our books and eat a snack while relaxing and reading. All in all, I'd be alone for a grand total of about 10 minutes at most while choosing my books. So, it's a normal day like that. My dad and I go to the store, and he tells me that he'll be waiting right over by the magazines as usual, and we split up. I was looking for a specific series that day, the Pokemon Adventures manga. So, instead of going to my usual shelf, I went to the info desk at the center of the store to see if they had any volumes in stock. I asked the nice lady at the counter, and while she was looking it up, I had seen the guy. At the time, he seemed very tall, but I was a kid, so it's entirely possible he was just average height. But I remember some specifics about him. He was white with dark brown hair that was cropped very short and a dark t-shirt, and he had a kind of large nose. He walked past me and was staring at me. We met eyes, and I said hello, and he said hello back. I was raised to be very polite, especially to elders, so I bowed my head a little and greeted him. He kept walking, and that was the end of it. I remember feeling slightly odd about the situation, maybe because he actually greeted me out loud instead of just nodding and smiling like one normally would when passing a stranger, or maybe just because I was a shy kid. In any case, the lady tells me where the Pokemon books are, in the children's area, at the back of the store. I go in the direction she points and find the books. I'm kneeling on the ground, paging through them, trying to figure out what the actual first volume is. There's a lot of Pokemon manga. When I had heard the same voice, he either said, "Hi, how are you?" or "Hi, what's your name?" Maybe even said his own name too, but if he did, I don't remember it. This is what I meant when I said some parts are blurry. But the part I vividly remember is looking up to see the guy towering above, staring down at me, holding his hand out as if he wanted to shake hands. I can't recall exactly how I felt in the moment, but I remember this deep discomfort in my chest, and I did not want to touch this guy in any way whatsoever, even in a simple handshake. For no specific reason, there were a million alarm bells in my tiny head, all of them saying, "Get away, get away, get away." So I just bowed my head and said, "I'm very sorry, but my dad says I'm not allowed to talk to strangers." And then I speed walked out of there. I found my dad and pretty much clung to his arm for the rest of the visit. I can't recall if I actually told him what happened or not, but I don't think I did, or saw the guy again for the rest of the time in the store. It's one of those things that you don't really think about a lot when it happens as a kid, but when I became an adult, I looked back on it and it got weirder and weirder. Why would he approach a kid that's alone in a store? He's presumably a grown man with no children, so why was he alone in the children's section, and why did he want to shake hands? Was he going to try to lead me out as soon as I took his hand? The really scary thing is, my dad is deaf, so if that guy did try to drag me out by the hand and I started screaming, my dad wouldn't have heard anything, though I'm sure that other patrons of the store would have intervened. Anyways, I didn't end up getting any books that day. I posted this in Missing 411, and in my planning of my upcoming camping trips felt the urge to post it here. It's mostly a copy-paste with an update on one of my family members. This may be a ramble of thoughts, but after recently stumbling on this sub, I finally felt a place I could offer something that my family and I experienced a few years ago that to this day gives me a shiver. I've been camping, solo backpacking, and hunting my entire life in Oregon, and felt comfortable in the woods and have a deep respect for nature. A few years ago, my wife, daughter, and 2 German shepherds went camping north of Mount Jefferson, Oregon. I've included the coordinates of our campsite, which we had found to be the perfect setup for us and our 2 dogs who need the privacy since they are intimidating to other dog owners and can be loud when spooked. It was not an established campsite, just a nice horseshoe off a USFS road that had flat ground full of trees and a fire pit. The first night, my daughter had wanted to sleep by herself in a 2-man tent right next to ours. It was maybe 2 feet away from me and my wife's tent. We made the male German shepherd sleep, Guts is his name, with her in the tent. That whole first night, either me or my wife could sleep. We both heard footsteps, and they were heavy, not like typical forest critters scampering around at that night. I was well armed because I was paranoid from recently reading before departing about a dad in California who was shot and killed in a tent next to his two infant daughters. Needless to say, both me and my wife had two pistols and my rifle with me. The dogs are great at detection, and that's why I felt my daughter could sleep alone, because Guts is completely fearless, and nothing would lay a hand on her without a battle to the death. All in all, nothing but bad vibes and loud footsteps occurred that night, which I ultimately decided was some deer or maybe some elk. Day 2, in the morning. We go for a walk down the road, and maybe 300 feet away see a circle area in the photo. I see an abandoned road where a rusted gate post with the gate missing, covered in vegetation. Something of a blue color had caught my eye, and Guts immediately takes off running down this abandoned road. My heart begins to race because I think it's another family camping like us, and he's going to get himself shot or scare some innocent people to death. So I chase after him as fast as I can, and the rest follow. He stops after about 20 feet into the road, and me yelling his name, but I've covered just enough distance to see that there's nobody there, and there's just something off about the sight. I yell, "Hello? Is anyone there?" "Sorry about the dog." I got no response. My curiosity gets the best of me, and I have to see what the site conditions were. As I get closer, I know something's wrong. Had all the necessities for a campsite, including a cooler, propane burner, tent, blankets, folding table, but every single item had been completely destroyed, smashed and torn from what appeared to be claw marks. We all walked around in circles, puzzled why anyone would leave their camping gear behind, including an expensive REI tent. I figured, well, someone left in a hurry and animals got to the rest was the only logical explanation. Still, a propane tank and cooler were flattened by something, and it certainly wasn't snowpack with a tree coverage in that spot. As the afternoon rolls in, me and my daughter are playing bossy ball in the campsite as my wife goes walking maybe 70 feet north to do her business. I didn't have a direct line of sight on her, but all of a sudden I see Guts make a mad dash straight towards her. Normally he would always be with me, unless he's called over, and she didn't call for him. His speed and focus caught my attention, and I knew something weird was happening. So I ran over there, and my wife started jogging at me, and I immediately drew my pistol. Guts has completely continued running into the forest, maybe another 100 feet, before I call him and he stops. My other dog, Leah, who never misses the opportunity to be in the pack leader, is not taking point. I have had her for about 7 years now, and this was the first time in my life she refused to leave my daughter's side. She was full hair raised and attached to us at the hip. Again, anytime we hike or play, Leah's out front, bossing everything in her path, and pauses to look at where we are and continues. I asked my wife what had happened, and she said, "I was trying to pee, and all of a sudden I felt my hairs raise, like when someone was watching me. I saw Guts running towards me, so I just got up and moved towards you." We spent 10 minutes looking for signs of anything, saw no trails, broken branches, and nothing to point to where something may have come or went. We decide that we should be spending one more night, since it's too late to pack up and drive, but we'll all be in the same tent together. Before we go to bed, I put a rope with a makeshift coin alarm around the perimeter of our campsite. I used a mint can and some coins and keys from our truck and zip-tied it so anything hitting the rope gave a little jingle. Very unsophisticated, but it put my life at ease. As I go to tie off the last corner at a tree near our tent, our third mystery item unveils itself. It looks like someone had done the exact same thing I had done with the rope, but it was so old and brown that I didn't see it at first. It was broken off and only a few pieces remained, but I'm sure enough it was tied at roughly the same height of 8 to 10 inches off the ground, and even had a few rusted washers on it. I immediately felt someone had stayed here before, and even put up the same makeshift warning system at the tree that I had maybe 10 or 15 years ago, based on the condition of the rope. Perhaps my paranoia has now reached a new height, but I had to make sure the girls were safe, and at the time the only thing I could think of was when the evening came around, I made them sit in the truck, and I fired a clip of my .45 in the dirt as a signal to whatever or whoever was out there that we were armed. I reassured the girls that anyone listening now knows that we have 2 wolves and we're armed. We were too risky of a target so we can sleep safely. That night we heard no footsteps and the dogs never perked up and barked. We left early the next morning. Fast forward to today, and I watched the Amazon Missing 411 Hunted documentary, and I noticed the cluster smack dab close to where we camped that weekend, and a flood of dread rushes me as I think of that mysterious abandoned campsite with the ripped tent and smashed cooler and cooking top. We have been camping since and have enjoyed the beauty of the Northwest, but there was something there at that place that possibly took or harmed someone else less than 300 feet away from where we were camped. We thank our lucky stars that Guts was doing his thing so well that afternoon. When I was about 14, I lived in a small town. My dad was there on a temporary assignment, and it was the summer of my 8th grade year, and we were about to move back to the city. I had a friend, his name was Lawrence, who I'd met at the local middle school. Since my family was leaving in a couple weeks, she let me stay the night over at Lawrence's house. Lawrence was a cool guy, but always tried to act tougher than he actually was. That morning, Lawrence tells me that he had found a cave in the woods about 2 miles out and said we should go exploring. In my naive 14-year-old mind, I thought this was a great idea. I mean, what's the worst that can happen? An important note is my friend hadn't been inside the cave yet. We go to the location. It's pretty far into the woods and very hidden. When we walk in, we discover that other people had been here before. We found beer bottles, potato chip bags, and other convenience store junk. Then a little further into the cave, we stumble onto this area. It's when my note meter started jumping. The area had a putrid smell and was lined with garbage. I saw a few needles, and at the time I didn't know what they were for. A grocery bag that had been seemed to be their portable outhouse, and a makeshift bed. Someone was living there. I know that there were homeless people in this area, but I'm on high alert at this point. I saw some other stuff that I later came to realize were sex toys. A ball gag, rope, beads, among other things. I'm getting nervous at this point, and we were potentially in a crazy homeless person's den. And the next thing I found was beyond creepy. It looked like a photo album. I picked up the album with one hand and held my flashlight with the other, trembling hard. The first thing I'd seen looked like vintage photos of a prison. However, then I saw a pile of bodies, and I immediately recognized that this was a Holocaust photo, because one of them was wearing a star on his uniform. The whole page looked like a graphic concentration camp photos. When I flipped the page, it noticed that the next two were stuck together, and I saw some gooey substance. It took a second for me to register what I was seeing. Keep in mind, I was only 14 at the time, and it hit me like a bag of bricks. This man had been masturbating to these photos. I froze in sheer terror because I couldn't imagine anyone being that fucked up. It's hard to describe the other feeling I was having, but it's the feeling when you experience evil in its purest form. At this point, my note meter jumped from a 9 to a 20. I see Lawrence was right behind me. Before, I was worried that if I had told him to leave, he would call me a pussy. At this point, I said, I don't fucking care. I told him that we needed to get out now, and to my surprise, he simply said, good idea. We noped the fuck out of there and didn't stop running until we had gotten home. That's when I realized when we had gotten back to his house, he had a look of pure dread. I told him about the book, and he then told me about what he had found. It's another book of women gagged and bound, and there was another photo of what looked like a child with a badly burnt face. He then said he heard someone coughing and moving further down in the cave that I didn't hear. That's when he'd finally come over to me and was about to tell me to run. We naturally told his parents about it that day, and the police were called, but the only thing they found was trash, so nothing came of it. So, creepy Holocaust burn victim masturbator, let's never meet in this lifetime or the next one.